Uh, Welcome to Meet the Artist, which is an endeavor organized by Munch UK. It's a new platform to meet new artists, I suppose, and established artists, where you get half an hour to listen to them talk about their lives. So I am SOORAJ SUBRAMANIAM, classical Indian and contemporary dancer, much privileged to be invited to speak on this platform. I will start at the very beginning, where I began my dance training. I owe all of it to my maternal grandmother, Poovalapil Lakshmikutti, who left India when she was 19 and moved to then Malaya, and where she didn't have the opportunity to learn dance herself, nor offer the opportunities to her children. By the time it came to the grandchildren, she made sure that we had those opportunities. So she traipsed us off to the local temple, the Rajarajeshwari temple in Kuala Lumpur, and enrolled us in lessons, Bharatanatyam lessons, run by the Padmini Kalalayam. I was 6, my sister was 4. It wasn't a matter of whether we liked it or not. We didn't really have a choice, we just went because that's what our grandmother wanted. But also, it's just something that we did without question. Yeah, we had a lot of fun doing that. A few years on, I've got some photos to share, so I'll keep doing this as we go along. This here is my maternal grandmother, Lakshmikutti, and in the background is my mum, Dr. Vanaja Panikar. And without these two women holding up the family, I don't suppose I would be where I am today. So, a few years on, having started at the Padmini Kalalayam, we moved on to Ramli Ibrahim's Sutra Dance Theatre, as it was known then. It is now known as the Sutra Foundation in Kuala Lumpur. And here we enrolled initially to do Bharatanatyam. And a year on into our training, Ramli insisted that we do classical ballet, just to train the physique. My grandmother was wholly opposed to this. She couldn't imagine us running around in tights, but she relented anyway because Ramli wouldn't say take no either. So we did ballet once a week, just as a conditioning exercise, because he was multi-trained as well in many dance vocabularies. We had Graham technique, we had Cunningham technique, we did contact improvisation. We had all these influences coming together to help boost what was our primary dance style, which was Bharatanatyam. A few years on, I didn't initially want to start doing Odissi because I didn't know what it was. When my sister started, I was jealous that she was getting the extra time, and so I joined the Odissi classes as well. Yeah, there was no looking back. One of the things that Ramli did for us from the very early age was to push us to not to have fear of the stage. So where we could do small performances, we did, whether it was local temples, whether it was for the Navaratri celebrations. All these things meant that from a very early stage, we overcame stage fright. And that's not to say that I don't get stage fright, but it means that I get to overcome it fairly quickly. One of the most wonderful things about being a child at Sutra was that there were always artists in and out of the studio. There were musicians, there were painters, there were actors, and of course other dancers of all different ethnic backgrounds, of all different genres. And this meant, again, that we had a rich and varied influence to what we were doing. One of the things that I take away from my time at Sutra with Ramliji is his broad vision of the arts, being able to embrace both the old and the new in one holistic way. So it didn't matter to us that we were Indian. Of course, to my grandmother, it was important that we maintained cultural heritage. But to me, growing up, it didn't matter to me that I was Indian. It didn't matter to the school that we were Indian. All that we were interested in was the pursuit of art and excellence. So I've again got a couple of pictures to show you. This is me at 6 years of age, and that's my sister Chamni performing at a Navaratri function at the Raja Rajeshwari temple. That was our very first performance. And several years later, having joined Sutra and going on trips with Ramliji around the world, and of course definitely to India, we had the good fortune to visit the Gotipua, who are traditional performers in Orissa. So what a privilege it was. We didn't realize then what sort of privilege it was to visit the village, to have them perform for us. And of course, at the end of it, their guru sang the Sthai refrain and had us dance for them. So looking back at these photographs, I realized what a privilege it was. Very, very few photographs with Ramliji. One of the few there, with him in the middle, and one of the other teachers, Guna, here on the right. And you see this sort of scrawny 14-year-old me in the background. And I've got one more to show you. And this was a couple of years earlier, and I absolutely love this picture because it just takes me back to a time in childhood where I had absolutely no worries really. And here I am right in the middle, this kind of elfin child. I was 11 years old here, and this is my friend, my dearest friend Rati, and in the background you see another wonderful dancer, Chitra Judith. So there was, including my sister, a cohort of us who just absolutely enjoyed dancing, and we took it as a serious hobby because Ramli treated it as such. There were no two ways about doing it in a haphazard way. And I think it was there that I had this idea that dance could really become a serious thing. However, as all Asian families tend to do, I left Malaysia at 17, and I regret to say that I've never lived with my family properly since the age of 17. I moved to Perth in Western Australia to go to university. I enrolled in the veterinary course because my mum was a vet, and of course it was a natural thing to do. And a lot of my friends have heard these stories but have not seen any proof. And so another couple of photos, bear with. There's one of me, stethoscope, poor sheep. And that's another one of me on one of my farm practicals. The very, very patient farmer there showing me the ropes, I suppose, on a dairy farm. So completely different world to dance. There were a couple of years when I just didn't dance at all, and then I thought, no, I have to get back to dancing, and the only class that I could go to, which was close enough to my university, was a ballet class. And because I'd had the background in ballet, I joined the class and was nurtured by the most generous, gentle teacher, Stella Johnson. Stella is absolutely instrumental in giving me the love of ballet and for pushing me to audition for eventually what would become my tertiary training in ballet. In my 4th year of veterinary science, my grandmother passed away, and that completely shattered my world and changed my perspective on a lot of things. I really had to think about what was important to me, why I was choosing the career path that I was in. And when I was sort of in this state of flux, the thing that I could fall back on was dance. And Stella was there kind of guiding me very, very gently and coaxing me to do dance. And she prepared me to audition for the Western Australian Academy of Performing Arts in Perth. I joined, I did the 3-year course, 3 years of the best 3 years of my life doing this course. And I was absolutely in love with ballet. I really thought that I would have a career here doing classical ballet. But there was one teacher, Reyes de Lara, who kind of broke that illusion for me. She flat out was honest with me, thank goodness for the Spanish, and she said to me that there's no way that I'd become a classical ballet dancer, and I truly appreciated that honesty. I was able to see that I hadn't started early enough, and it wasn't a career path that was suited to me. All this while, I had been also dancing, practicing Bharatanatyam with my cousin, who lived in Perth then, Premala Sangarananda, and we ran the Mudra dance company, teaching and performing Bharatanatyam. What we really wanted then was to form a kind of solid syllabus to teach. So we looked up on the internet, found the ISTD in the UK, wrote to them for their syllabus, and they duly sent us out a copy of their syllabus booklet. Looking back on it, I realized that the syllabus came from the secretary of the ISTD then, Nina Rajarani. So, unbeknownst to me, a few years down the track, I would move to the UK and work full-time for Nina. I moved to the UK in 2007, thinking that I was going to join repertory companies and be employed full-time. That didn't happen. I did plenty of auditions. I cried on many of the occasions when I didn't get through. Walking home, I remember catching buses home and just thinking, why have I come to this dreadful country? And then there was an audition call for Nina's company, Srishti, Nina Rajarani Dance Creations. And I auditioned, I got in, and then worked for Nina for the next 5 years full-time, both as performer and teacher. And it kind of opened up my world here to see what it was like to work in the performing arts industry in the UK. What I take away from the time that I worked for Nina is her meticulous, ordered nature when it comes her approach to dance. I had the opportunity to teach Bharatanatyam extensively, and I saw the building blocks of Bharatanatyam and was able to use that to decode very complex things. What I admire the most about Nina is that she's unapologetically committed to the integrity of the style that she teaches. And this has helped me shape some of my conviction in the styles that I do. During this time in London, I also learned Kathak. I started learning Kathak with Urja Desai. Absolutely wonderful person, above and beyond being a performer. And without her generosity, I couldn't always afford to go to classes. And if it were not for her generosity, I wouldn't have been able to continue with those classes. So she paved the way for me to do Kathak. And I think she's done this for all her students. She taught us how to string our gungurus. There's something really special when you're able to string this most important part of Indian classical dance attire, and you have a really special relationship with it. And I've carried this with me all the years, and I've taken it with me in my other senses of dress. Being in the UK, the other companies that I've worked for are with Balbir Singh. Balbir has a childlike, insistent curiosity about dance, which is really quite infectious. What he's allowed me to do is have the freedom to be myself. And what I like about his work is that he allows for there to be abstraction, to find the relationship between Kathak and just about everything. So in the works that I've done with him, with mirrors, with painting, with bicycles, with swimming pools, I like the idea that you remain curious to the possibilities. And through his generosity, I've been able to connect with Padma Shri Guru Pratap Pawar, who, for his seniority and experience, has been completely down to earth in how he treated a novice like myself. I've only taken a few lessons from him, but again, to aspire to have that sort of down to earth relationship with the student is really quite something. I've done work then with Shobhana Jaising Dance and done some of their major works in the recent years. It's been an extraordinary trip touring across the UK and Europe doing work for their company. What I take away from working with Shobhana is the fact that she really studies the subject matter before she delves into it, and her attention to detail is incredible. In looking for meaning through abstractions and impressions. Another person who's really shaped how I view dance is Guru Madhavi Mudgal in Delhi. I had the opportunity of going to one of the Milat Fest summer workshops and met Madhaviji there, and then later on had the opportunity to travel to Delhi to meet her. And what I take away, she's one of the most dignified persons that I know. And she has a really rich but understated approach to Odissi, which I I don't want to mimic, but I desperately want to emulate. I just find it really nurturing for the soul. I moved to Belgium at the end of 2012 because I married my partner Tom. And when I moved here, initially I didn't have a lot of work, but I soon met Kalpana. Kalpana Raghuraman is a dancer of Indian origin who is Dutch and who lives in Brussels, and who is a choreographer who's making bold and interesting work. What I cherish about working with her is the absolute humanity with which she treats her dancers and colleagues. She's completely down to earth. She has a bellowing laughter that puts everybody at ease, and there's an absolute lack of judgment in the space that she creates, allowing dancers to be vulnerable. And in being vulnerable, you're able to find the recesses of experience, and in there make your performance genuine. As an aside, I was reading a post that was recently made by Maithili Prakash, making the distinction between the words depiction and experiencing. And it's really wonderful how when you're afraid of performing something, the easiest option is to depict it and not really go into the extremes of experience. And I found it wonderful that she talked about experience in the sense that it doesn't matter to the audience what you're doing, but what's important is that if you can tap into some resource, some emotional resource that's a part of you, then the performance becomes that little bit more genuine. Again, leading from there, I had the wonderful opportunity to work with some amazingly young choreographers. My colleague Avatara Ayuso, who is just bold and fresh in her outlook, and is again an unapologetic feminist in her views about things. My other friend and colleague Sita Patel, whose work I've been in recently, and again she's managed to, it's not just the work and her kind of knack for composing dance, but the environment that she's created as a budding choreographer working with ensemble in ensemble environments. This kind of lovely camaraderie that she's created amongst the crew and the cast. Again, this is something that I would like to take away if I ever end up creating my own dance company. Finally, the most recent experience that's kind of shaped how I see things has been attending an Abhinaya workshop that I went to in Irniyalakuda in Kerala, run by the Kuriyatam Guru G. Venu. What I absolutely loved about this was the exploration within the space without judgment, without the need to get anything right, simply to experience the rasas that we were trying to portray. It was quite a fresh way to look at how to approach performance, and I came away from there with tools to overcome inhibition that truly opened my eyes and kind of left me with goosebumps at the end of it. And of course I continue all of this experience by continuing to go to India, continuing to see performance, continuing to engage with talks and other such things, and hearing people speak about dance. Now, just to think about a few things that are important to me. These are questions that I've been asked and things that I'm thinking about myself. How do I find the parallels between the different dance styles? I've been asked how I managed these different dance styles together. I find the parallel for myself between the different languages, between the different dance styles to the languages that I speak, in the sense that being multilingual and finding a natural fluency in each particular language, there isn't a clash between any of the styles. They sit in my body quite naturally, I think, I hope. And over time, through practice, you come to find the distinctions. So there is no argument between them, and they're able to speak to one another in a friendly way. I'd like to think about my personal routine. This is one of the things that I've done growing up. Dance has come fairly easily to me since childhood. I grasped concepts very quickly, and as a result, I didn't practice very much because I'd always think I'd leave it to the last moment and I'll get it anyway. But this is something that's changed over the years as I've become older, and I've realized the value of practice and the ease that comes from repetition. And of course, learning the strengths and weaknesses in my own body, finding I've always had an insecurity about the length of my torso and the length of my limbs. But in working with all these choreographers I mentioned earlier, I'm able to find vulnerability and tap into that as a strength. Other things that have kind of come up in the time that I've been here, questions which have become relevant to me as an adult, finally approaching dance, moving from the UK to Belgium, losing some of my network, finding it difficult to recreate a new network here, not taking for granted that you'd have connections naturally. So the questions that have come up for me are, for whom are we dancing? Why are we dancing? Is it to entertain? Is it to subvert? Is it personal expression? Pardon me. Is it to preserve tradition or spirituality? I am sentimental about the traditions because I've been predisposed to them since childhood, but I don't put them on a pedestal because I know they'll be changing. I choose not to romanticize the dance styles, which I do, because I know that they're always in a state of flux. I don't mind things even if they're vulgar. What I choose not to abide by is things which are unkind. And so I continue these conversations with my friends and colleagues. We come back to what is traditional, and what is tradition for whom. I prefer to seek the value in certain traditions rather than uphold traditions for tradition's sake. For example, tying the sari in terms of costuming, which is something that I've learned from my guru, Ramli ji. In all our performances, we never used stitch costumes. There's a certain, in the time that it takes to turn yourself from a lay person to a performer, the ritual value in that is that it allows you to contemplate what you're about to do. And there is no price, the value that you can put on it, and this has shaped me beyond measure. Finally, to beard or not to beard. As you can see, I'm fully bearded at the moment, and I like my facial hair. There's this ever annoying conversation about the gender of the performer, the gendered nature of performance material, the male gaze, and so on. What I find troublesome in these questions is that those who seem to be afraid of the effeminate man also choose to emasculate by having him razored and rouged. So I choose to dispense with some of those ideas and make my own, as I'm sure every artist would choose to have the prerogative to do those things. Flippancy aside, the greater question is who wields the power to decide what is appropriate viewing, and who bestows the power of choice to the artists. Are individual artists ever autonomous? It simply isn't enough when we think about this platform here for us, for artists to be able to come on here and speak about themselves. We're in a terribly privileged position to be able to do this, despite the fact that we're all quarantined in our homes. What I'd like to query is the lauding of the performing arts as something as beautiful and uplifting, and then forgetting about the artist as soon as we go back to normal. What I'd like to see is support for the artists in terms of infrastructure, in terms of moral support, in terms of all sorts of things, for people who are making a living out of these things, so that when things do go back to normal, we remember the fact that we value these things in society. Please, yes, support the artists by going to performances, buying tickets and seeing them. I'll come to a couple of questions at the end. These are questions that people have asked me ahead of time, so I've prepared some responses. But if you've got any further questions, just leave them in the comments below and I'll respond to them later on. What was your most precious moment during dance, and do you keep striving for the same moment? This is from my friend Shraddha. I think performing in a group and finding synchronicity between dancers whom you're familiar with, that sort of thrill from dancing together with other people is unmatched. I miss that very much from my days of dancing at Sutra, and I hope to someday that will come back again in ensemble performance. To have a fulfilling artistic journey, what are the best practices a dancer should have? This is from dear Meenakshi Grama. I think we need to recognize the privilege we have as artists. None of us are charged with feeding the poor or solving a housing crisis, but without undermining the value of what we do, I think it's great to keep our egos in check. Practice, enjoy practicing, because it's what we will be doing more than performing. Go and see loads of other performances, keep your minds open, and I'd like to seek to form relationships for the value of people's humanity rather than the utility. So how would you say your relationship with dance has changed over the last 10 to 15 years? This is by dear Shivangi Agrawal. There's loads of things that have changed. Obviously, I've aged and matured, coming to learn the strengths and limitations of my body. But I think the most important thing is that I no longer feel that dance is something I need to conquer. I'm learning to yield alongside exerting my will. And finally, when and how did you decide to go into full-time dancing? This is by Anusha Subramaniam. When I was 17 and finishing school, my dance teacher brought me a prospectus from the Juilliard School in New York, and I was just blown away, thinking that this could be an opportunity. Obviously, it wasn't part of the expectations my family had for me. We folded it away and put it away. But therein was sown the idea that there was a pathway that could be taken towards a career in dancing. I think that's where it started. We'd always done dance seriously, but I still, somewhere, I've probably lost it now, but I remember that prospectus and I held on to it for many years, thinking that that could be a pathway for me in life. We're almost at the end. I will complete my ramblings here. I would like to thank Meera Kaushik and the Munch UK team, which is made up of these wonderful volunteers, Ambika, Subbalakshmi, Vidya and Suhani. Tune in again tomorrow at the same time, 6 p.m. The UK time, to see the wonderful Monisha Patel Bharadwaj speak about her career, her journey in dance. I will conclude. Because I'm not performing some dance for you, I will read you a bit of prose poetry that I've penned, and I'll conclude with that. And a sleep is descended upon the day, a turn in shade and lull in step. Just as the sun gives away some of its ferocity and allows blankets to cover it lazily, clouds puffed from a full night's rest, rolling in a blue swell of weightlessness. In the distance I see towers I might climb, a scene from a tomorrow, a palace of fruit that is to me promised as some gift of harvest, from seeds I know not sown in which soil of past deeds. The lashes that crown the eyes dance sensuous, the slow dance of somnus, dreams a tapping, fanciful and frill. My vision, though, is unwavering, conquering promises sure-footed and serendipitous. fingers in the sand, sunbeams through the nimbus, graceful, grateful. Thank you.